So today I wanted to take a little bit of a step back and focus on what is to come. And instead of focusing on the season, more so about training camp and just prepping for what we're going to see once the season actually starts. And with that, I wanted to talk about three potential training camp battles or preseason battles, depending on how you look at it, where we could see some movement as far as the rotation is concerned. Because yes, the Utah Jazz are expected to be a bad team this year. Yes, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of young guys, some older guys that need to recoup some value. And because of that, it actually makes for a very interesting conversation to a certain degree. With that being said, if you're new to the channel, it's your boy Wraith Hoops, and tune in this video. Go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications if you're into NBA basketball. Today, we're talking about the Utah Jazz up front. With that being said, let's go to get into this one. So the first one to me is the most obvious, which is going to be Walker Kessler against John Collins. You have two sides of this coin. The first being John Collins, obviously competitively compared to the market, being overpaid drastically because of the value that he doesn't bring on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, more so defensively than offensively. And then you have Walker Kessler, who the training camp battle will be against, because remember, Kessler intermittently was able to start, then got put on the bench in favor of John Collins because of his floor spacing ability. And just to be quite frank, John Collins over the course of the season was the better rebounder. Walker Kessler was still a great defender of the paint, but that wasn't simply enough. And compared to the rookie season that we saw from him, we were hoping to see something more, and we didn't quite get that. So they're both coming off of rather underwhelming showcases last year. Though John Collins' numbers are objectively better, a lot of people could say that no matter how you slice it, he's just not worth the money that he's being paid, and that's why it's been so hard to trade him. Walker Kessler, in a similar role, hasn't really shown the step forward that everybody was hoping. So coming into this third year, the question becomes, do you allow Walker Kessler to show you who he is as a player and either put himself on the trading block or show you why he demands to be a core part of the future of the franchise? Or do you just play John Collins to showcase him to other teams in hopes that somebody says, you know what, we can really use his services? Even if they don't put him at the 5, if they put him as a stretch 4, maybe that's the role for him. The ultimate thing from Danny Ainge, Will Hardy, and just the rest of that front office as a whole is deciding which direction they want to go. Because obviously you want to play the young guys, and for myself, I would lean towards playing Walker Kessler out the gate, because Walker, in my mind, doesn't need to be perfect. Nobody's asking that of him. But he needs to show more promise. He needs to show more effort in certain facets of the game. And we didn't really get to see that last year, so it makes us feel as though we were either cheated or that some things may not pan out. And because we're in social media age and everything's under a microscope, it can kind of come across as him not trying hard enough. And while I don't necessarily think that's necessarily the case, some people could argue that that is the case. And there's honestly a conversation to be had about that, because a lot of it comes down to his overall effort and his aggression when it comes to cleaning up the glass or just finishing at the rim. But more than anything, I just want to see him take more attempts. So for me, I think that the winner of that battle will be Walker Kessler. I think it should be Walker Kessler, but it is also Walker Kessler's to lose, because John Collins only got it last year because Walker did not do the job out the gate that they were hoping him to be able to do. Similarly, moving to the second spot, we have Cody Williams, an upcoming rookie, and the one that has the highest, I guess, potential upside and also the highest level of expectation out of the rookie class we just drafted, versus Svi Mykhailiuk. And I think that it's going to be interesting, because this was one of those things where I actually saw this article on the J Notes website referring to the three, and I just at first didn't make sense to me, to be quite honest with you, because to me, Svi's more of a mentorship role. But when you talk about Cody Williams and how he should be NBA ready to a certain extent, the question also becomes, okay, what if he's not? What if he needs more development? What if he needs more of a competitive battle to push him forward, to make him a better player behind the scenes and in practice? I think Svi might be the ideal person to put there, because yes, he is a journeyman. Yes, he just came from the Boston Celtics. He has his ring now. He has his hardware. So he's just kind of doing stuff that might get him some minutes, might get him the opportunity to show who he is as a player, or just, get some extra money. Why not? You're at the highest level of basketball that most people tend to believe in the world, so it makes sense. But I also understand that you shouldn't just give all the rookies minutes immediately out the gate. Yes, you want to lose, but you also want them to have quality minutes and not just get rolled out there to get steamrolled, because at that point they're not learning anything. And I think that in practice, him and Svi going back and forth, even though I think they'll both probably play, I think that Cody Williams is objectively just the better choice, to be quite honest with you. But there's also something to say about the fact that what if he comes out and he doesn't show out? What if he continually has bad stints? What if he doesn't step up to the plate and he just needs a little bit more time to hunker down, get some reps in, put a little bit more work in the weight room, and make some later on mistakes? And there's a conversation to be had about that, because that does happen to some rookies. Everybody isn't ready to just hit the hardwood and go flying up and down the court every year. That's not how the lottery works. That's not how the NBA works. It's just not that simple. Some people have it faster than others. Some people have it slower than others. It's a thing about running your own race and putting yourself in the best position to succeed. And it's up to the franchise to make sure they also do that. There's been multiple guys in the past who have looked like they were ready for the pro level, looked like they were ready for the NBA, and out the gate they were force-fed minutes over and over and over again. And then when they started making mistakes, there was nobody to sit there and say, okay, we're going to temporarily switch this out. We're going to make this adjustment. We're going to give you smaller minutes. We're going to put you in these particular situations to allow you to build up your confidence, to make mistakes properly, and then help reinforce the positives that you're doing. Instead, they were just laid out there to get slain, and they never really recovered. And I think that there's been quite a few people throughout NBA history, and more so over the past probably 10 to 12 years, if I'm going to be quite honest with you. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the situation here. And I think that Svi being, willful competition in this regard will be necessary. Even if it does end up being Cody Williams for the foreseeable future, which makes sense to me, there's always going to need to be that extra person that can be paired with those guys one-on-one and hold them to a higher standard for themselves. Moving on to the last pairing, it was Patty Mills and Isaiah Collier. And this makes a little bit more sense to me. Because yes, you have a full guard room. Yes, you're trying to see if Keontae George can run the point guard. Yes, you're trying to see if Colin Sexton can run the point guard, if he's going to be the two guard for forever. If you're going to end up having to trade him, how well he's going to fit with the new guys, how this young core is going to build around itself. That's important to pay attention to. And you also added Patty Mills. And Patty Mills, over the past couple of years, has regressed, obviously. He's getting up there in his 30s. His career's in the twilight years. So he's more of a mentor than anything. But at the same time, the boy can still play. We saw it in the Olympics, right? So he has the ability to understand the facets of the game that the young guys just quite simply don't. And that knowledge and that leadership is going to be fundamental in teaching these guys how to take steps forward. Isaiah Collier, out the gate, is he the better player than Patty Mills? I don't know. If you asked me before this past college season, I probably would have said, yeah, why not? Because Isaiah Collier was also expected to be the best player in the draft class. But he ended up falling a substantial margin, partially because of injury, partially because of turnover proneness. And honestly, at times he gives off the vibe of a younger Colin Sexton. All gas, no brakes. High level of turnover proneness, not the greatest, passer of the ball. But I think Patty Mills is actually an ideal switch to mentor him in this way, because you're going to be battling with this man every day in practice, especially if he's not in the G League. I think he will spend some time down there, but I also think he'll get a fair share of games where he's either on the bench for an actual regular season game with the Utah Jazz, or he'll actually get 10 to 20-ish minutes depending on the night, depending on who's sitting, who's in, just how rotations go. I think that there's a conversation to be had about that, because it makes sense that Isaiah Collier needs to learn. His game is a little bit unpolished. It's not as smooth as Cody Williams, and people might argue that it's not as NBA ready. But who's better to teach him than somebody that spent so much time being a professional number one just to get to the NBA, originally being from Australia, and secondarily spending so much time in the Spurs, who are considered to be one of the best ran organizations over a multiple decade span. So I think that Patty Mills, at this advanced age, with his understanding of the fundamentals, understanding of how the game has progressed, and just the little nooks and crannies, all those nuggets of knowledge would be a gold mine for a guy like Isaiah Collier. And I think that he would be very coachable in that way and just willing to go through those growing pains. And I don't think that there's anybody better, especially when you think at the fact that Patty Mills isn't necessarily here to take somebody's starting role. That's not why he came here. He came here to enjoy the journey. And number one, I am greatly appreciative of that. And at first, I really wasn't big on the signing. But when you put into context this little facet, this little wrinkle in the timeline of how things could play out, it makes a lot of sense. And I don't want to necessarily put Collier under a lot of stress, under a lot of pressure, under a lot of duress. but I think that it would serve him well to have some level of competition. Also, if you're incapable of at least putting up a fight against a 36, 37-year-old Patty Mills, I believe, you're probably not ready to play big minutes in the NBA, period. And that's not necessarily the biggest knock, but it is a knock because at this stage, he doesn't have the same athleticism he once had. He's not as fast as he once was, but he knows the game. And that will take you very far. But at the same time, if you're a young guy, you're out the gate. It depends on how fast you can learn, because the faster you learn, the more it'll show. And against a guy like Patty Mills, that's going to be important. But let me know what other battles you guys think will end up happening in training camp. Whose minutes do you think are going to be up for grabs as well? Kyle Filipowski is somebody I didn't talk about, but I'm also up in the air about how things could work. Obviously, if we see John Collins get traded, or Walker Kessler comes out the gate and he's not doing well and they feel a certain way at the trade deadline, the Knicks still need somebody. Mitchell Robinson's not coming back till January. Maybe something gets worked out there with us. Who's to say? But I think that it's going to be a very interesting and active trade deadline. And if the Utah Jazz aren't the only team that's really involved in it, there's going to be a lot of other interesting conversations to be had throughout the process. With that being said, though, it's your boy Ray26 tuning in this video. If you're into the Utah Jazz or you like NBA basketball, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications, or become a member, drop a donation to help support the content. With that being said, as always, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you're on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys